Support comes from Seattle Restored, revitalizing Seattle neighborhoods with creativity and commerce. Over 95 vacant storefronts have been transformed into vibrant pop-up shops, window art installations, and artist residences. Explore current and past locations at seattlerestored.org.
Support comes from Pacific Northwest Ballet, presenting the Northwest holiday tradition, the Nutcracker, live and on stage at McCaw Hall through December 28th. The Nutcracker is a journey through a holiday party, epic battle, and falling snow in the land of sweets. Tickets and info at pnb.org.
Susan Orlean has traveled all over the world for the stories that appear in her best-selling books, in her magazine writing, and in the incredible work she's done for decades at The New Yorker. She's talked to people as ordinary as Colin Duffy, a 10-year-old who became the focus of a cover story she wrote for Esquire magazine in 1992, and as flashy as Mark Wahlberg, who in the same year was the rapper known as Marky Mark, who she wrote about for The New Yorker's Talk of the Town. Her work has been adapted into movies, like did y'all know Meryl Streep once played her? I didn't. And she's inspired countless writers, myself included. Susan's work represents the heyday of print journalism, I think, when writers could have a romp of a time reporting just so that readers could have a romp of a time reading. And a romp is exactly how I would describe her new memoir, Joyride. I'm Katie Campbell, and this is a bonus episode of Meet Me Here, your weekly guide to arts and culture events worth leaving your house for. Susan dropped by the studio while she was in Seattle on tour with Joyride. By the time you're hearing this, she's come and gone, unfortunately. But still, she's got so much to say about her new book, what she loved about the Pacific Northwest, where she started her career, and the future of journalism. So for all of us who missed Susan Orlean's live event here in Seattle, I had to talk to her. And believe me when I say I was a little stunned that you were up for it while you were in town, Susan. Hello.
I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy you're joining us. So, Susan, I want to start by sharing a kind of fun fact with you. Your Marky Mark piece for Talk of the Town was published on the day I was born, November 2nd,
no.
1992.
Oh, my God. Well, now I feel properly old.
I was going to say, is that weird to say?
It's very weird to say.
I'm sorry.
You know, when I look at my career and realize I've been writing for so long, I'm a little shocked, I have to admit. And I'm also happy to say that it doesn't feel old to me. It doesn't feel like, I've done this for so long. I don't have the energy or the interest. Each story I do feels like a whole new adventure.
Yeah, I've got to say, reading Joyride, I just finished it. I can feel that energy and interest in it. Like, you just seem so excited to still be doing this job. What's the secret?
I think the real secret is letting yourself follow curiosity, feeling that sense of engagement with the world. And there's almost no way that it can't invigorate you to learn something new. And that is what it's all about. It really is about continuously learning and exploring things you didn't know anything about and becoming kind of engrossed in it.
So I mentioned in part that connection to the Marky Mark piece to illustrate that I came into the world of journalism years after you. And that world, our world of journalism, I think, looks very different today. What's different, do you think, about your work and the industry today from when you wrote the Marky Mark profile?
It's changed enormously. I think you cannot deny that. I started my career in the era of alternative news weeklies. They were thriving. They were everywhere in the country. Every city had at least one newspaper, let alone two newspapers. Those newspapers all had Sunday magazines. There was a robust, healthy landscape of national magazines. There was Newsweek. There was Time. That was the world that I entered. There were a lot of opportunities to do these long narrative nonfiction pieces that I was really interested in. Then slowly, one by one, these outlets vanished for I don't think for lack of interest from readers. I think it was just an economic issue. There go the alternative news weeklies, then the Sunday magazines, then lots of the big magazines where I got my start disappeared. It's just a very different world. I didn't write the book to be a nostalgic look at the magazine world because I just don't think that way. I feel like that's not useful for anybody to wring their hands and say, oh, back in the old days, back in the good days. But I don't think you can deny that reading habits have changed. The way we consume news and features has changed, perhaps permanently.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking on a podcast right now, right? Like that wasn't a thing in the 90s when you got your start at The New Yorker, for example. This is kind of like the new long-form journalism.
Right, exactly. And similarly, you look at things like Substack, or The New Yorker didn't have a website when, for many, many, many years after I started writing there. And the website suddenly opened up all of this territory to fill with stories. So
support comes from Seattle Restored, revitalizing Seattle neighborhoods with creativity and commerce. Over 95 vacant storefronts have been transformed into vibrant pop-up shops, window art installations, and artist residences. Explore current and past locations at seattlerestored.org.
Support comes from Pacific Northwest Ballet, presenting the Northwest holiday tradition, the Nutcracker, live and on stage at McCaw Hall through December 28th. The Nutcracker is a journey through a holiday party, epic battle, and falling snow in the land of sweets. Tickets and info at pnb.org.
it's not all doom and gloom.
But we're talking about opportunities that you found early in your career, and I had no idea that you found some of those early opportunities here in the Pacific Northwest.
I did. I moved to Portland right out of college with some crazy fantasy that I was going to become a writer. And I had pitched this to my parents as a year that I would spend getting ready to go to law school. And I never had any intention of spending the year getting ready for law school. But I got very, very lucky. There was one of these little alternative publications starting up.
The Paper Rose.
Paper Rose, which was hiring people with as little experience as I had, which was zero. And we immediately were put to work and told, go out, come up with story ideas and write them. It was a remarkably fortunate place to begin. It was a little scary, a little thrilling, and I kind of learned on the fly. From there, I went to Willamette Week, which is one of the sole remaining survivors of the alternative news weekly world. And that was an incredibly fortunate place to be. I spent the next 3 years working there, and I really think of that as where I got my start. It was the first time that I worked with editors who were really experienced, who were interested in helping us young writers learn to be good writers. And again, I was really a writer. I was out there coming up with story ideas, figuring out how to report them, figuring out how to write them. But it felt like a very guided path with people who were able to say, this works in your story, this doesn't work, here's the principles that you should keep in mind while you're writing. It was really a wonderful place to work.
Yeah, it sounds like you received the mentorship that a lot of young journalists dream of. And it is on page 41 of Joyride, you do describe it as the place where you became a real writer. I wonder what kind of stories out of Oregon attracted you? What kind of things in Portland were going on that you wanted to put your special Susan Orlean twist on?
Well, one of the great things was I was a newcomer. Portland to me was this exotic new place that I grew up in the Midwest. So being out west, being in the Pacific Northwest, being in a city I didn't know well, it all animated me. It was all exciting. I also discovered that I was very comfortable writing about things that I really knew nothing about. And that was a huge turning point for me as a writer. When you're a young writer, often you're told, write what you know. And I would sometimes think, but I don't know anything. I'm 23. I don't know anything. I then discovered I was very comfortable leaning into what I didn't know. So I loved writing about the city. I loved poking into corners of the city that were not kind of on the beaten path, trying to understand what was this new place that I lived in, who lived here, what were their lives like. It just unfolded for me constantly. But then I got my big break when I was living in Portland, writing for Willamette Week, and the Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh had bought a huge ranch in Eastern Oregon and set up his world headquarters. And in that story, I saw the possibility of a piece that could be a national story. So that was the first piece I ever did for a national publication. I just thought it's local, but this has a universal appeal. I just know it.
So one of the things I do here at KUOW is I run the KUOW Book Club, and we focus on authors from the Pacific Northwest or stories that really encapsulate it. And something I've noticed is that writers from this region seem to have a real affinity with it, that the mood and atmosphere and quirkiness always seems to worm its way into these writers' stories. I wonder if you ever found yourself trying to capture that special, PNW flavor, and do you think you were able to?
There was certainly a spirit, a quality of life here that felt very different to me from being in the Midwest. It had the spirit of the sort of pioneer. Then I think there was a very real sense that you were on the very edge of the country, that you were just about ready to tip off the United States, and that had that sense of kind of freewheeling reinvention. Everything on the West Coast, I think, feels that way. The Pacific Northwest had its own very particular flavor that was influenced by the weather, by the landscape, that was so palpable. And for me, it was so extraordinary and new. Also, at the time I moved to Portland, the city was small. It was relatively undiscovered. You had to say to people, Portland, Oregon, because otherwise they thought Portland, Maine. And it did not have a big national profile. There was an opportunity to truly take whatever you wanted and become that thing. And there was a wonderful sense of enterprise and invention that is unique, I think, to the Pacific Northwest. And I certainly felt it being in Portland.
Do you think then that Portland had an impact on your becoming the writer you wanted yourself to be?
Well, those years, even though they represent, at this point, a relatively small percentage of the years I've been on planet Earth, had an outsized impact. There's no question. It was very different from going to New York, having one chance, maybe not having it turn out as well as you'd like, and that's it.
So our industry has changed dramatically over the years, as we've talked about. And that beautiful sort of storytelling that you do and the work that goes into it, it's just funded far less than it once was. It's harder to get those opportunities. But I want to know, Susan, why you think readers should care about that. People listening right now, what does it mean to readers that you once journeyed to Bhutan and Cuba and the Fakahatchee Strand in Florida on a bit of a lark and got to tell those stories?
I think that's a great question and a great observation. Throughout the history of the written word, journalists, writers have existed to be the proxy for the rest of the population. it's not that we do things that no one else can do. It's that we've kind of anointed ourselves to be storytellers and to go journeying far and wide and to come back and report to you what we found. There's an inherent value in all of us being exposed to the outer world. That's the nature of expanding your horizons, literally and figuratively, is learning about things that aren't immediately in front of you. But you can't always do that. You can't always be available to go climb Mount Fuji or to go and interview Little League baseball players in Cuba. But that is what my job is. And I feel like I can bring you the world in ways that will enrich your own experience. That has not changed. There's still the interpretive role of a storyteller. That really matters. And for me to say, let me go to the Fakahatchee Strand and explore the story that you probably wouldn't have ever heard of otherwise. It's interesting to me how often readers will say to me, boy, I never thought I'd read a book about orchids. I never thought I'd read a book about libraries. And I'm happy for that response because I feel that that's meant that I've brought something into your world that you wouldn't have encountered otherwise. And that's the enduring value of storytelling. That I feel will never go away.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I hope you're right. And so much of this book feels like it's written for writers. Like you're giving tips and insight into your process and talking about the power of storytelling. And then there are also deeply personal bits that almost feel like delicately scattered. Among them, you recount the pain, for example, of discovering your first husband, Peter, had cheated on you, the decision to get divorced. You also write beautifully about finding your second and current husband, John. What was that like to recount personal details, to make yourself vulnerable in the way that we journalists ask our subjects to be?
Well, that's what's so interesting, because having done this so many times with the shoe on the other foot and asking people to talk deeply and intimately about their own lives, I hesitated. I felt, on one hand, there was a part of me that felt just very private. These are personal things. They're not relevant to the story I'm telling. And also a part of me that felt like, well, nobody really needs to know. They don't care about these details. And yet I also was trying to give a very fully realized portrait of my life in this world of being a storyteller. It felt like it would be oddly lopsided to not include what the rest of my life was, because it factored into my life as a writer. Certainly talking about becoming a mother was fundamental and certainly a part of the book that meant a lot to me, because I struggled with parenthood as a working person, and a working person with an irregular schedule. And as I said in the book, there were many women writers at The New Yorker, and it had never occurred to me to say to any of them, how did you do this? How do I do this? I have a baby now. What do I do? It felt important to include that, and also to say to people, look, this is a deeply personal pursuit as a profession. Your own life leaks into it at all times, and you deserve to see a bit behind the curtain, or I can say to you, as I was working on this book, I was going through a difficult time, and the fact is it probably emerged in the writing in ways that I don't even realize.
Well, Susan, we started off on a vaguely awkward note with me mentioning I was born when your Marky Mark profile came out, so we'll end on a vaguely awkward note. pardon the question, Susan, but you recently turned 70. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
You've lived a hell of a life, Susan, it seems like. And I hope you have plenty more to live in this exuberant way. And you've done the memoir thing now. You've laid out life as you've known it so far on the page. What does the next chapter look like? Is there going to be another Susan Orlean bestseller? Is Meryl Streep going to get tapped to play you again?
Well, I should hope so. I have signed a new book contract, even though each time I finish a book, I always vow that I will never do another book because it's so much work. But I kind of fell into an idea that I loved and was fascinated by. So I found myself saying, all right, one more. And also I hope to continue doing magazine work as well, balancing a little bit of each. A book takes, it's a long game with a lot of research before you begin writing. It's something that you don't get immediate feedback on. So doing magazine work in the meantime can be a nice way to continue feeling like you're still in conversation with readers.
Yeah. Can we get any hint on what the book's going to be about?
Well, it's kind of early,
Sure.
but it's about a building. I will say that much.
Okay.
It's about a building.
Well, having been a huge fan of the library book, I feel like only you could do a building justice.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I said to somebody the other day, well, it's a book about a building, she said, well, you've already done a book about a building. And I thought, I did? Are you sure? And then I thought, oh, my God, I did. I hadn't realized that. This is a very different building.
Okay.
But it's a wonderful story, and I'm very excited.
Well, I think everyone listening will be excited to hear that. Susan Orlean is a journalist and author of 8 books now, including her memoir, Joyride. Susan, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation.
And thank you for listening to this bonus episode of Meet Me Here with Susan Orlean. Meet Me Here is produced by KUOW, a proud member of the NPR network. It's hosted by me, Katie Campbell, Dyer Oxley, and Jeannie Yandel. And it's produced by Brandy Fullwood, Kyle Norris, and Matt Martin. You can find more and support the show at KUOW.org/meet. I'm Katie Campbell, and I'll meet y'all back here for our next regularly scheduled episode on Wednesday.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.